There we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand spanking new episode of Who Do You Think You Are? My name is Lassia. I am your host. And once again, as always, on this show and in life, here is my co host, Mr. Glenn Sheridan.
Hello, everyone.
And today we have another super special guest that we're really excited to talk to. And just before we get into the conversation and introductions, I would just like to say thank you, thank you, thank you. We are so grateful to be coming to you from Saanich on Vancouver Island on the unceded lands of the Wasanich people, where we live, work, breathe, and play, and are so eternally grateful to be able to do so. So, without further ado, here's a little bit about our guest today. This individual considers herself a creative problem solver, and she is an award-winning multimedia professional. Her love of the outdoors and concern about environmental degradation and climate change have set her on a path to create healthier, happier communities rooted in regenerative decision-making. She is also an award-winning professional photographer. She is the organizer of some of Canada's largest Zero Waste Earth Week festivals. She is also the founder of the free community solutions hub, creativelyunited.org, and producer and host of popular climate and arts webinar series. She is a lifelong resident of Vancouver Island, Canada, absolutely loves nature, part of which I think was the inspiration for her most recent TEDx talk at TEDx Surrey in February, which the talk was called How to Heal the Future, Not Steal the Future. She has also been published in numerous magazines and books, written scripts, created 58 solutions for lighter and healthier living guide, which is available on creativelyunited.org, as well as produced 3 short films: The Harmless Home, A Building Revolution, Awaken, A Forest Ballet, and Trees Matter. This is just a little bit about who it is that we're going to be speaking to today. I know that there is so much more to unpack, so much more to discover. So as we begin the show, as always, I would love to ask our guest today, Frances Litman, tell us, who do you think you are?
I ask myself that all the time. Who do I think I am, and how did I think I was going to do this? I'm actually a very passionate, as a lot of people have described me that way, positive possibilitist. Now, I don't even know if that word exists, but when you're a possibilitist, of course everything exists. So that's my word. I'm a passionate, positive possibilitist. And what that means is that I truly believe anything is possible and that we are creating our future in the present of every moment of every day, like right now. So, what do we want? And if that's we're not having what we want, then we better start working on what we do want and focus on that, because that's what keeps me sane, especially in these crazy times, is just telling myself that anything is possible. And since we are all creators, I love to think that we're going to land on this and start collectively as one united consciousness, which is what I'm really guides me, is to just focus on what we want versus what we don't want. The classic law of attraction sort of mandate. And I'm a lover of beauty, and especially natural beauty. So the beauty of our forests and our oceans, and having a lifetime of looking at things through a variety of lenses, being a professional photographer, I've seen things through, micro lenses where you're right into the stamen of a flower, like you can feel it almost tickling your nose when you're taking that photo, to using telephoto lenses that bring that distant view right into your face and help you see all the depths and layers and the beauty of just creation. So as a photographer, I've really it's helped me connect the dots, and it really stirred my soul to action. So, and I'm one of these people too. As a child, I used to watch David Suzuki, Nature of Things, and I remember thinking at age 4, I hope the adults are going to do something about saving our planet. So, because back in, the 60s, David Suzuki was ringing the alarm bells about climate back then, and showing what we could lose if we didn't do something. And I remember thinking, and he was talking about 2020, and I remember thinking that was way in the future. So, but I sure hope the adults are doing something. And I was that kid who always had her hand up in school. Always. I was just needed to have my questions answered. There was just so many questions. So that curiosity is something that has always driven me, but there's always been this latent creativity that I never knew I had until I picked up a camera in my adulthood. And as a result, my world just came to life. And through that camera, like I said, I've really seen how interconnected everything is. And I've also seen how the resource extraction and destruction of our natural world is directly related to social inequity and injustice. And as a child who grew up in the 60s, who saw the Vietnam War on TV, because we were one of the first generations to really start getting into that TV land, and seeing kids, my age, fleeing in terror from the napalm bombs, it etched in my soul. And we always had Time magazine in the house, which was a photo journalistic type of magazine. And seeing the pictures of war and desecration and suffering just made me realize that there's got to be a better way, because my world wasn't like that. How come their world was like that? And how do we stop having that kind of world? So I'm a truth seeker. And that's where asking a lot of questions and having a lot of hard knocks in my upbringing helped me really see the world maybe in a more, I don't know, just interconnected collective consciousness kind of way. Although at that age, I didn't really realize that I was seeing the world maybe differently than some of my classmates, but I was always that person, and I still am, who really is really, I think, quite a deep thinker. Like I don't spend a lot of time on TV, although I love movies. And of course I love anything visual, but I spend a lot of time thinking. Maybe I'm in my head too much, and then I'm creating. So it's the creative process that it's like anyone who's tapped into their creativity knows that once a creator, always a creator. Like you cannot stop creativity once you've got it flowing. And I think that's just our existence. And in fact, today, I don't know if anyone gets the Abraham Hicks quotes, but there's a beautiful, simple little quote from Abraham Hicks today that basically, that's law of attraction, that is saying that you can't stop creation. So what are you creating? So I probably talked too long now, but
not at all. There's 20 different topics that we could hit on at any given moment right there. Curiosity, interconnectivity, the creative process, creativity, truth, asking questions, macro versus micro. And I think what really comes to mind for me is the fact that because you are a photographer and a filmmaker and you literally use different lenses through which you view the world, I would love to talk about the idea, the concept of the lens, as something that is a physical thing that we can put in front of our faces, and then also as a psychological, emotional, metaphysical, quantum thing, which is, the lens that we see ourselves, that we see our world through based on what we're thinking, what we're believing, what we're feeling. And so to me, what I'm hearing is, from a very young age. I mean, you talked about how when you were 4, you were, sort of like hoping and thinking, boy, I sure hope that the adults do something to help, say, fix the world, change the world kind of thing. And asking, questions and wondering about stuff like, this is going on in another part of the world. How can that be happening when over here in my world, it's a completely different experience? And that was way back then, never mind, a lifetime of experiences to say even what's happened in our own country, in our own province, in our own area, just in the last couple of years, during the COVID unfoldment and response and government and lots of different ways of perceiving what has happened with that entire unfoldment and that response. And then the seeming global pivot about a month ago from COVID to Ukraine and Russia and what's happening there. And how ideals like freedom change and shift depending on who it is that's talking about it, how it is that it's being interpreted, how it is that it's being fought for, questioned, brought to light. So I would love to talk about lenses, because that just seems like such an amazing direction to go in, because you are a photographer, because you are a filmmaker, and because you are a self-avowed truth seeker and someone who is just continually questioning and not just questioning, but you're stepping into action all the time in an effort to make the world a better place, in an effort to ensure that old growth forests and the beauty and power and magnificence of nature is not only kept intact, but is celebrated and honored and revered. So you want to jump in on any of that and sort of talk about anything that comes to mind?
Sure. Well, my career started quite young in a daily newspaper, the Times Colonist. It was formerly known as the Colonist when I started there, and then be merged into two papers. So, I was very fortunate as a young person, because I started when I was 16. That was my big, it wasn't my first job, but it was my first major job. And I witnessed the end of an era, because it was like the old was going out with the old teletypes and the print setters, and a lot of people were losing their jobs. And I was very fortunate. I happened to be able to keep my job, and I started, and I'm going back to this because it is all very relevant. It really shaped my perception of the world and my decision to get into photography. And I started there basically as a postal clerk, but an opening came open for a junior reporter about 2 years after I started. And it initially was like as a postal clerk in my sort of an office clerk, and in my weekend job while I was in high school. And then when I graduated, I was out on my own. I didn't have a family of my own to support me. I had been brought up in a foster situation, and I really needed to have work. And fortunately, I just put all my energy into just wanting, needing to have a job and to work in that newspaper. It's all I knew. And they had become my family. And so at the time these mergers were happening, I was next on the chopping block, I found out. But fortunately, because I had started in high school, I had this seniority. But I saw the difference, from an old world going out of teletype, and, where photos would, excuse me, come in basically by like a very fancy fax machine. And I remember seeing when John Lennon was shot, I became an editorial assistant and a junior reporter over time. And that's how I had access to this newsroom and to the images, and then the photographers who, I started to hang out with. They became my tribe. I was hanging out in the dark rooms and learning darkroom work, and just, with this dream that maybe someday I'd become a photographer, but didn't know if that would ever happen. But in the meantime, I was a rewrite person and learning everything I could about sort of journalism. And and seeing how much news and how many photos would come in from all these news stories, because this was the original newswire before the internet. So you've got to understand that newspapers were one of the first to have internet through the Canadian newswires, or the Canadian Press and all the different newswires, Associated Press, So when we went from old typewriters, which I witnessed, like they could smoke and drink and be at the typewriters, just like the movies.
Yeah.
And within a year to see that go into computers and everyone's struggling to learn this, and then all this information just coming at people, and the editors choosing what goes into a paper, and the photographers just going out and taking all these photos and stories, and seeing how the whole process came together, I realized how much news we don't see. And that was absolutely fascinating, because I had to be on the computer too for my stories, and I would I would cruise through the newswires and look at what was happening in the world. And I remember many times going to the news editor and going, oh my gosh, do you know about this and this, and how come, are we going to do a story? No, we don't have room for it. And it'd be like, and how the news that we received was so guided by how many ads were in a paper, how much space they could get in, how much they could publish. And then that news, just like we see today, big story one day, gone the next, time for a new one, keeping public entertained. Back in the day, I have to say, those editors were amazing at picking real good news stories, but there was so much. And so that's when I realized a photo was worth 1,000 words. So I wanted to show the world through photography, and find that world through photography. And I was actually, and I still am, I shouldn't say I was. I mean, at that age, I was a really nervous, I was sort of a cocky kid, because I was filled with this everything is possible. So that drove me, but I was very much an introvert. So the photography, it was wonderful, because I could hide behind the camera and record what was happening in front of me. And I think a lot of people feel that way, even with their phones. It's a barrier to really feeling exposed, but it allows people the opportunity to experience the world. And that's what I think photography really does. It kind of gives you a shield of sorts, even if it's your phone, and allows you to experience the world feeling a little safer somehow with a device or lenses. And with the lenses, I could really choose the world I wanted to see. I chose to see the beauty, really chose to delve into the beauty. And that was in everyone and everything. And as things would turn out, the thing that absolutely scared me the most to photograph was people. But that became my whole career, was basically photographing people, and nature, and any type of nature photography became my secondary, when I had time, hobby. I didn't do nature or anything like that for money. I did it just for myself. So people became my specialty, and I would see the beauty in everybody and everything, and try to pull that out, even if people couldn't see it in themselves.
Wow. I can totally speak to a whole bunch of stuff there, but I see Glenn smiling, and I'm thinking that maybe you want to jump in. No? Are you unmuting or no?
I'll unmute to say, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, so again, a few things that came out there for me, and just this sort of the idea of the camera or the phone or device or something like that as a shield. It reminds me, I don't know if it's going to connect for listeners or for you guys, but it reminds me of a saying, dance like no one's watching. And when I first heard that, or had heard it in the past, and I thought, oh yeah, like just like dance with abandon, and like you're by yourself and whatever, that's great. But then my teacher, said, well, why would you only feel like that when you're by yourself? Like if you're being true to yourself and you're showing up authentically, then it would stand to reason that you should be able to dance like your true self, whether someone's watching or not. So just be you, no matter what kind of thing. And I mean, I do it too, but I feel like there's a lot of hiding going on. And whether it's, behind a camera, behind a screen, behind a phone, whether it's behind something that we do to occupy our time rather than like really sit with who we are and really feel who we are and allow that creativity that is unstoppable that you were talking about earlier to come through in a way that it can only express itself through us. I wonder what that hiding is about. Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think it's about insecurity, not feeling like we're like I can't tell you how many times I won awards or was celebrated during my career, and I had, I think, what you would call imposter syndrome. I was quite convinced that, and I think a lot of it had to do with my upbringing and not having the support of many people in my life saying good work, or you're doing it. And so when I achieved these things, it was an inner thrill, but it was like oh my gosh, if they only knew. And sort of that stigma that I grew up with as an adopted child, and then an adopted child that ended up in foster care, that oh well, nobody, you're not, you don't have what everyone else has, like, so you're less worthy or something, like that kind of I remember people telling me, like, even as a child, that oh, you're adopted, oh, I would never adopt a child, and I remember just being so shocked by that, because I felt quite special that I had been adopted, and it made me feel good that I was adopted, not still sitting in some orphanage.
Yeah.
So I think those kind of old tapes play out in you, and it's taken most of my life to overcome that terror of feeling exposed.
Yeah, that it's, I mean, I asked that question also having an answer, in my mind, because being immersed in consciousness and spiritual studies and working with people as a coach who helps people to shift and let go, of the limiting thoughts, stories, and beliefs that keep them feeling stuck, to, reaching for and embracing the infinite creativity, the infinite resilience, the infinite, love that they are at their core. That's what so many people are working on at any given moment, or that's what so many people are stuck in without even knowing that they are that way. And I mean, even though I do the work with other people, this work is always happening for me. Like, it's ongoing all the time. And imposter syndrome, I mean, the number of times that I have felt that, and just, even in finishing the book that I just finished and submitted the manuscript to the publisher a couple of days ago, it took 12 years for that book to come to fruition, because there were these limiting beliefs, in me that said, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, and you don't have what it takes to succeed. And then later on, more recently, was, and no one wants to hear what you have to say. So, but to keep doing the work regardless, because I know, and even if it started out as an intellectual, sort of aha, when I first stepped into the community, that opened my eyes to, there's only one thing going on, call it energy, call it universe, call it creativity, God, source, light, love, whatever works for you. It's all energy. There's nothing that is not energy, which means that each and every one of us is that energy all the time. It's like we don't start and stop. It's like flowing continuously and just expressing itself however it can through each and every one of us, through photography, through painting, through writing, through being a parent, through just being, a tree, a mountain, whatever. And we're all reflections of each other. And I think that, at least for me, when I first learned that, for me, it was incredibly empowering, because it was like, okay, so that means that no one else is controlling my mind. No one else is, the boss of me, so to speak. I get to choose. You talked about choosing, a few minutes ago. I get to choose how I see the world. I get to choose how I see myself. I get to choose. In fact, I'm always choosing So wouldn't it be better to be aware of how and what I'm choosing and the kind of life I'm creating versus just going along and having things happen by chance or by default according to things and beliefs and thoughts that I'm not even aware of? So that's sort of like, that's all part of it. And I guess, the answer to my own question would be that the reason that we hide, the reason that we feel comfortable with maybe, something in our hands in front of us or whatever, so we don't feel completely exposed is because that's what we're used to. That's what we're comfortable with. Even if it might not feel that great, it's what we know. And to venture out into the unknown, to further expose ourselves to, like, even expose ourselves, not to other people, but expose ourselves to the truth of who we are, that infinite creativity that is always in play. Like, how do you even wrap your mind around that? Like, it's infinite. No beginning, no end, always happening. Sometimes that can feel like it's just a little too heady, and yeah.
I think the younger generation, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but boy, it seems like the generations that are, behind, like coming up behind us here, are getting this so much quicker. I just can't believe how many teens and 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds that I've met that I'm going, you already get this? It took me most of my life to get there. Like, what the heck? Were we just in some fog? It feels like we really were in some sort of weird fog, and we've come out and going, oh, I figured it out. And it's like, yeah, but they already got it.
and it's interesting that you say that, because we have a 17-year-old daughter. She'll be 18 in July, and she is graduating high school this year, and she is on her way back to Toronto because, well, she's had one foot left in Toronto since we moved here 5.5 years ago, and so she's always been, on her way back there. She is so excited and so looking forward to moving on to the next chapter of her life, of going to college, being back in Toronto with some of her friends from Montessori that she grew up with there, and being reconnected with our very large community of 30 plus years there for both Glenn and me. There's also some, nervousness, but it's more excitement, not like, I don't know how to do this, I can't do this, she just, her entire life has been, I'm doing this is happening. It's the words, I don't know how, don't often come out of her mouth, or at least not to us. She just figures it out. And to the point where a few years ago in class, when I was writing a thought paper for one of my classes, it dawned on me that one of the reasons that Milana is my daughter and I get to be her parent is because she is a constant reminder for me of what it means to live from who you truly are, live as the infinite potentiality and creativity that is always in flow, live as, epic confidence and enthusiasm, and knowing her value and knowing her worth. And I know that we as parents, we had a hand in that, but not the same kind of hand that my parents had in raising me. And which is not to say that they did it wrong. It was different, and they did the very best that they knew how to do, with what they had at the time and what they knew at the time, kind of thing. But I feel like my dad's no longer around, but I feel like when my mom looks at me now, it's more of a, I don't get it. Okay, like she seems happy and she's doing something she's really interested in, but I don't quite get it. And still has all the concerns of, like, will I have enough money, before I die? Just stuff that has been, on the forefront of her mind for a long time. Whereas, I look at Milana in awe, and I'm like, I am so proud of her as her mom, but she for me is inspiration every moment of every day to be better at who I am, to be more of who I truly am. And I feel like, we just hit the lottery, the kid lottery, when Milana chose us as her parents, because she has been my greatest teacher my entire, since being her parent anyway. And I'm just so grateful for that. And I look forward to the day when she has kids that are, butting up against her, to challenge her down the road where, they're going to be sort of, beyond her kind of thing. And, the way that she is with us now. But yeah, it's just like, they just go about their lives. They just live their lives. They don't have the same sort of boundaries or, boxed expectations. I don't know if that, says it correctly, that I feel like I did when I was growing up, or even still am like, kicking and clawing my way out of. There isn't nearly as much, at least from what I can see, unlearning that needs to happen with her, because she has lived a life so far creating a life that she is really enjoying and loving, and is further, fostering that creativity that she is, to just, propel itself outward and radiate outwards, onto everyone and everything that she meets, kind of thing. And that for me is very, very exciting. And I don't know if my parents felt that kind of thing about me in my life, but that would be their experience, like they had their experience. They, went through their journeys, kind of thing, which were theirs to take, and no one else's. So it's a very interesting position to be in, to be a parent of a kid who's like, oh my god, you're awesome, and then be a child of someone who is like, I don't get it. So Honey Bunch, are you ready?
Where do I start? Um, yeah, I think I kind of, I mean, Milana's her own thing. I know there's amazing kids who are real go-getters and earth changers, and they pick their path, as they come into this life, and they're opening new frontiers and all that. But I think a lot of children are going to be having a very different experience from that, because they're being forced, as society kind of shifts into this technology based norm. They're being shifted into this kind of look, you know, where all the fun is actually in the metaverse, or in a virtual setting. They're being kind of funneled into that kind of, because that's where money can be made, right? And that's where influence can be had with the new generation. And just to get a little bit conspiracy theory, like I think there's a little bit of a, you know, the technology change you were talking about earlier, Francis, about the news, the model for putting news out in media. It's been shifting all the time. Since, well, even before the written word, but in recent times, you've gone from technology that is like audio, radio kind of thing, into visual. And then once we get into computers, then you have this new frontier of Silicon Valley types saying, we're all connected, man. Like, it's all hippy dippy, and look what we can do. We can talk to someone in Saigon, and we can do, we can play something with our video game with our neighbor on the corner, or they could be in Russia or whatever. And we've got this thing of like, once the the dot-com bubble thing happened, you had like a realization is like, well, we got to make money with this stuff. So that's when the ad model changed, and that's when people started, didn't realize all this free stuff was actually just using their data and selling that data to whoever. I don't know who's getting it and paying for it now, but so all of these amazing devices, there's another side to that of like, people's conversations being recorded on obviously their phones and on their smart appliances and their those Roomba, those little uh, vacuum cleaners that go around your house. Apparently, they were picking up data, and when Google did their amazing, like, Street View thing, they were just stripping Wi-Fi data off all the neighborhoods. Like, so that's the dark side of it. So what I'm saying is, children these days, their norm as they're pulling into adolescence, and I'm sure there's this kind of cloud of there's a version of what you experience looking at David Suzuki stuff on CBC as a kid, going like, what I hope the adults are doing something where we've had decades of like, these adults are idiots and they don't know what they're doing and they're making it worse, and my God, and they're going into like a very difficult mental state where, you know the norm now is to be kind of medicated because life is just stressful, as a young person, and that's terrible
Mm-hmm.
because they have not been given the option, the tool of going out into nature, and grounding, and like very few of them have had that sort of choice. They've just been said, they've been told what they need to be, normal is a cell phone and to have an iPad, right? And it's like, if I was that kid, I would feel probably the same way. Like, yeah, mom, dad, I want an iPad. I need a phone. You don't understand. Whereas, like, going going out into nature, I've only more recently discovered this. It's like grounding and being around you know, even the air. You start to realize through your breath and things like that, your connection with everything through your breath, and through that kind of like that cycle, right? And I kind of wonder, like, what's going to come in the next few years, and then I guess decades. What will these children contribute? Because they are being fixated right now, I think, on some very particular things, whether it's, political things like gender ideology, or, you know, um, racism stuff, or the climate stuff, or whatever. They're told, like, you must polarize around this issue, and there's really my saying for it, or my explanation for it is, um, one side fits all. Like, you can only see this from one side. If you don't, you're a monster. And to be told that as a child, I just think, like, whoa. I wasn't taught that like, I was taught, you know, not to be rowdy and whatever in school, but like, I was at least given an opportunity to share an opinion that
Mm-hmm.
may be different from the norm. And I don't think that's what's happening these days. I don't know what your
Oh,
input on that would be.
Glenn, what you have to say, there's that part of me that just goes, thank goodness I'm not a child, but I know we're all going to come back in some form. But it really frightens me because that disconnect from all that sustains us, truly sustains us, which is, the planet, like the earth, the water, the air, the trees, like we are not separate from that. We are part of that. Like we are nature. We are nature.
Yep.
But we're being tried to, like you're saying, it's like we're being forced into a way of being that suits corporations to make money. And and the medication, absolutely. The way you just look at, I guess, as a critical thinker, I wouldn't call it conspiracist, I'd say critical thinker. Like that's where people need to see that, of course, there's labels for people who see beyond the obvious. And that's the one thing I know I've had the gift of, is seeing beyond the obvious. And it sounds like obviously the both of you do too, or we wouldn't be in this beautiful program together. So it's a case that I think that the blinders are being really put on, like led to the trough, is what's happening with our society. And my goal is to, just try to keep the possibility that people will remain completely awake and understand, wake up to the fact that we have to uh, respect and revere the environment around us, because we have nothing without it. And no, there's a really fabulous, when on this topic, it's a fabulous little animated film, and it's by the Gaia Institute, and it's called Wake Up Call, and I highly recommend everyone see it. I showed it to a high school group, and I think their teacher was like, "Oh, I didn't know you'd be showing this." But it's but then, with the understanding that if you're going to show something, and it's exactly what you're speaking to, Glenn, if you're going to show that, that you talk about that solutions do exist. And I've been reminded many times that I haven't seen it, and I've got to do this, that I don't know if it's A Bug's Life. I think it's the movie A Bug's Life. I haven't seen it, but someone told me there is a great scene in that where there's a couple big carpenter ants, and then there's all the little worker ants, and the little worker ants are starting to organize and go, things aren't right, we're being overworked, we're being worked to death, we're not being treated right. And that basically, those worker ants represent our population in general, and the few carpenter ants represent, if we want to call it, for lack of a better word, the 1%. And the 1% ants are basically turn to each other when they start seeing that there's an uprising of consciousness amongst the worker ants, and they turn to each other and go, oh my God, if they knew how many of them there are and how few of us there are, we're doomed. And it was like, that's just like that graphic I think people have seen, where you've got the school of fish coming together to confront the shark. Otherwise, you've got the shark opening its mouth with one fish, but you've got the school of fish now basically bigger than the shark. And I think this direction, this relentless push, like AI is the answer to the future and our life and everything. I think it's imperative that kids are introduced and spend some time in nature. However, when you look at what's happening, especially we look here, and especially in Langford, there's kids growing up without a tree outside their window, where it used to be a lush, beautiful forest, and now it's just a bunch of row houses with just asphalt, not a tree in sight. And everything is being directed towards keeping those kids, it seems, from nature rather than getting them into nature. So I think personally it would be very empowering, and I think it is very empowering for children and youth to be in nature. All people, it's known, the health benefits in nature are known, and I think the more people that know about it, the more there will be that movement. And that's what this is going to take. It's going to take a movement of collective consciousness. I firmly believe it, of people realizing it doesn't have to be like this.
I think what it's like, there's sort of an automatic series of statements that happen when we bring these things up, and typically what happens is both people agree that there's this idea of they are in control, the government, or the military industrial complex or whatever is like organizing things so that so we'll say that there's a story, a narrative that describes they, right? And that is true as far as the story goes. Like, you can carry along that, and you can live your whole life talking about they, or those bastards, or whatever it is. But the thing with that is there's always going to be the other side who are going to go, no, they are the problem. You guys are the problem. The people who want to sit around and do nothing all day. They are the, so you can see that there's always going to be two sides to that story, right? Mm-hmm. But to pull back and go, what we've been talking about is the nature aspect and the creativity aspect. And people have a really hard time with this notion that they themselves are so powerful that they are actually creating their environment. They are creating their experience, and we are combining together to create an image of of nature and life. So we see it as like external from us, and we forget that no, we're part of this, and we are creating it, and we're doing that through our thoughts and our feelings and our beliefs, and nobody talks about that stuff, right? So uh, if you introduce those ideas, or you even as a young child, you can nurture someone to be creative and like quirky when compared to other children who are not encouraged to be creative. They're on the wackier end of like, oh well, just like there are fewer boundaries and limits. But if they are able to retain their core knowledge of that I'm a part of all that is, I'm part of God, I'm whatever. Um, that consciousness and energy flows through them, and they become leaders, and they lead by example, and that kind of spreads, I think. And it takes over. It sort of makes that other story of the they, the them, and us, it makes it irrelevant. And I think exactly what's happening now, like, it's a weird time to be alive. Like, what's happening in Russia today, like this very week, where these bizarre governments throughout the world have decided, oh, there's a crisis going on, and Lassie and I have talked, and we've even talked on the podcast of her family are Ukrainian, and there's there is at least culturally there's skin in the game here within this family for the Ukrainian people. So we're not downplaying that. I'm just saying the stuff that's going on with the sanctions being placed on Russian individuals and these oligarchs, but mainly on the Russian people, and the narrative that this is like inevitable. We have to do this. These sanctions are the only way to blah 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 blah. And I'm thinking, what? Hold on a second. Um, there's something else going on. I don't really trust what that story, no matter who's saying it, because that's like, no, there's always another way. There's always dialogue. Peace um, is always like better than the experience of war and then peace, obviously, right? So when you have Russia coming out and saying to the West German government and France, and most of Europe gets their gas from Russia, wheat, oil, gas, and fertilizer for like, what is the West going to do without that stuff? They're going to suffer, you know. So
That's the narrative. I don't believe that
for
personally.
them to say the Russians to say, hey guys, you know what? You've placed sanctions on us, so we can't actually buy anything. We've been locked out of the international community. So our only solution is for you to come to us and buy our goods in rubles or gold. And why wouldn't they? Because they want to continue, or you know what? Forget you guys. We'll talk to Russia. We'll talk to India, Saudi Arabia, and China, and Brazil or whatever. And the Western world is being told, oh, oh, these gas prices. Oh my God, Putin's a maniac. Where have you been for the last year? This is insane. Um, but this notion of there's only one story is becoming comical. Like, it's becoming like more people are waking up to the idea of, that's a phony baloney. But I'm hoping that it goes one or two more levels beyond that, where they can go, I don't even need these guys. I don't need this story. Like, yes, I need to like make my way in the world and buy food and whatever, and that's going up. And but maybe there's another way to make food. Maybe I can bake my own bread, have a garden, trade with my neighbors, teach young kids how to do their part in that, and they love learning about gardening and all that stuff, right? Um, and I just think that it's a weird opportunity, and you'll also have this thing of the technology. the narrative about, no, we must move to electric cars and stuff, right? Sure, there's a place for that, but like the mining of the earth that goes on in creating one battery for an electric car is quite, it's kind of repulsive. So that part isn't being told. I think we need to know a little bit more about like what are the it's cost benefit thing. What are the short and long term gains here?
Mhm.
So someone's making money out of electric cars, but it's not necessarily the only solution. I mean, I'm sure someone has built a water or hydrogen based fuel source thing that it's just being buried in the patent system somewhere,
Oh,
and we're
absolutely,
not being
all the
told about it,
time.
right?
All
Yeah,
the time. You hear about it all the time. Of these government comes along every couple of years and puts a call out to innovators. I've talked to several of them, and then they buy up the patents of the good green technology and dump it. And
yeah,
just you never see it or hear about it. And I, in fact, met some people, very wise scientists in Kauai, who had figured out a way to, refurbish all the cars we have so that we don't have to keep producing cars. We can use what's there and have them run exactly on a system that is highly reliable. I couldn't tell you the science behind it, but they got shut down
yeah.
by the government because it didn't meet, quote, their safety regulations or some darn thing. But I like, again, I totally agree with what you're saying, Glenn, and I think really we're at this place where we can see that there are alternatives, and that's where that possibilitist in me comes out, because I really want people to focus on the solutions, not the problem. And I mean, obviously we have to know what the problem is to focus on the solutions, but nevertheless, uh, the amount of solutions that exist and the ingenuity of people is incredible. Like the last webinar I did, we focused on housing that heals the future. And one of the things that we talked about with people who are doing this is how to retain vast tracts of forests but still build communities. And it's basically what's old is new again. So that idea of creating a hamlet where the
Mhm.
people buy into something that gives them a house in this community, into this village, but by clustering everybody closely and not having that widespread sprawl, can save a lot of forest. And then, of course, that forest is sequestering carbon, right? Then you make it a community where people can work and live and play there. You make it off there's so many ways to make it off the grid almost, there's bioswales and solar panels. There's all kinds of these ways to do life differently. And hopefully, all I can say is that these lessons that we're seeing come before us with this war and with all the BS, for lack of am I still there? I saw it.
Yep, you're
Yep.
here. Yep.
And lack of truth and the hiding of truth. I think people are wising up and seeing that maybe instead of getting, like, we all have to feel that pain and cry a bit maybe, but we have to get up and get on with it. And the thing that gets me is when people just think there's nothing they can do, and there's something we can all do, every single one of us. And it is going to take a movement. And if people just say, it's easier to accept this and just watch the world go to nuclear explosion or something, then such a pity, because this is a golden opportunity. And I think we've been presented with this opportunity to kind of get us out of the old and into the new, but back to the old that worked. And that's where I feel like First Nations wisdom is just, they maintained and stewarded and knew how to live with earth and in partnership with earth in such a way that we have so much to learn, and all the knowledge is already there. We just need to maybe step back.
Yeah. Okay, last back to you.
Wow. Well, as I'm listening to you guys speak, I just, I'm like, I agree. I don't agree. I agree with some of that. And it's just, it's so fascinating to me because I'm taking in everything you guys are talking about and endeavoring to see it from a more spirit, not more, from a spiritual and quantum perspective, that at any given moment, you know, we're all experiencing a completely different reality. Even though it may seem like we're in the same reality, even in this conversation, each of us is having a different experience and creating a different experience.
Mhm.
And you know, I think about when Glenn and I have these conversations where he's saying, you know, I think people are really starting to wake up. They're really, and I'm like, what people? What people are you talking about? Like the, you know, like the people that and this is from someone who like, this is my work. This is my area of study, is to like know that this is what's happening. And even though there are individuals that I meet who, you know, let's just use the term waking up, there is a larger, you know, collective consciousness, or a larger body of people, let's just say the collective, that sometimes I wonder, really, you know, like who still believes that what is being told on mainstream media is the one and only way of looking at things. I'm not even calling it news anymore, because it's not news. Like you were talking about what news was when you started at 16, you know, working in the mailroom or whatever it was that you know were doing for the Times colonists, and how that changed, you know, in a very short amount of time, and the learning curve that was involved. And I can't remember which world event or war it was where, you know, news changed from being the delivery of facts to, you know, the delivery of opinion, and, you know, being skewed towards a certain narrative or view. And that's what it is now. Like we're just like it boggles my mind, and this is a total judgment on my part, and it's going out live on YouTube and it's recorded into this podcast now, that what comes through legacy media is true, is exactly what's happening. And how can we possibly know at this point what is true? And is there only one true way of looking at things? Is there only one truth? Because if you look at it from a quantum perspective, there's your truth, there's your truth, there's my truth. There's a new truth every single moment. And what is true for you may not be true for me. And so for me, it's this whole notion of infinite possibilities. You know, I love your passionate, positive, possibilitist thing, because infinite possibilities in you know, to choose from, infinite realities to step into or draw from at any given time. And to think about, you know, let's go back to what worked well in the past. Yeah, let's draw from the stuff that, you know, that did work, but not like worked back then to make it be like back then, but because it works and it's relevant and it's applicable to where we are right now, to create a better life experience for everyone. And not in terms of it's the same experience for everyone, but where everyone benefits, where nature is, you know, respected and revered, and we realize how interconnected we are. You know, not that we are just a part of, but like, you know, I think everyone here has said, we are nature. Nature is us. You know, the Emerson in the essay Nature, like that's what he talks about, you know, when you look at the mountain, when you look at the ocean, when you hear the cracking of thunder, you know, instead of being in awe of nature, like be in awe of the fact that you are that same power. You are as powerful and majestic and magnificent as any mountain, as any 400-year-old redwood tree, as that cracking thunder and lightning bolt that, you know, like can sear and crack, you know, a tree open at any given moment. That's how powerful and creative we are. So like, let's embrace that. Let's step into it. And instead of using our devices and thoughts and beliefs and feelings as shields, let's use them as magic creative wands to create the reality that best showcases the power and creativity that we are. And that is not a linear thing. It is not something that is ongoing. It is something that is happening brand spanking new every single moment. Every single moment is an opportunity to choose what we're going to focus on, what kind of life experience we're going to create, and how we're going to respond to what is going on around us, not in terms of, us versus them, or, if you're not with us, you're against us, or that, there are others, but that everyone is where they're at on their journey. Everyone is at a certain level of awareness or consciousness expressing at any given moment. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, a spiral, moving forwards and backwards, going outwards in like what at pulsing, it's constantly shifting and changing. And because it's not a straight line arrow trajectory, I don't know, it takes me back to Honey Bunch when we were talking with Danielle LeBeau Peterson a couple of podcasts ago, and she was talking about the consciousness, the vast pool of consciousness, and how, liquid being poured in and stirred and creating something new and different, and then being poured out and going into something new and different again. It makes me think of, a river as it flows. It's directed by the bank, but at the same time, it's carving out the bank as well as it's flowing. So we're all, participating. We're all in the way that we create our lives. We're all responding to the life that we're creating. And we always have the opportunity to listen and watch and observe and question what someone else says, what is going on around us, how it is that we're responding, how it is that we're relating, because there are more than 2 sides to any story. There are more than just, options A, B, or C. And there are many truths. I believe that there are many truths that can be discovered and leaned into at any given time. So this conversation is awesome. Thank you. I just love it.
Thrilled to hear that too. So yeah, and when I think back, I'm not the expert to speak on this, but there have been moments, I forget, the Great Convergence or something it was called. I believe it was in the 70s, where people came together, meditators came together in mass in Washington, D.C. I can't remember how many thousands there were. But it was reported and monitored. Crime rate went right down. Wars ended. The Berlin Wall and all that stuff started to crumble. I'm sorry, that cut out again. The old structures began to crumble that weren't serving people. And it just proved the exponential power of the collective. So when people get together in mass to pray or to meditate, huge, amazing things can happen.
Yeah, well, that honestly, okay, so there is this quote by Dr. Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of religious science and the author of Science of Mind, among other books. One in consciousness with the infinite constitutes a majority. So it's not even that you necessarily have to have, a bunch of people together, but if you get 1 person, 5 people, 1,000 people, whether they're in the same place or not, vibrating at the highest level of consciousness, you can only, up level consciousness everywhere of everyone and everything, because we're all energy, because we're all interconnected. It has to happen. Like there is no other way that, it can be, because we're all part and parcel of that one active, expanding creativity that is consciousness all the time. And yeah. And to that, I mean, that is why I meditate every day. That is why I facilitate a weekly meditation in our home, because even though everything I just said, I believe to be true, I love being in a room with people meditating together. I love working with my prayer partners, because even though I pray every single day, when I get together and sit down with my prayer partner, all of whom through Zoom, not in person, because they're all down south, south of the Canada-US border, praying together for each other, knowing for each other is just so incredibly powerful and uplifting and up-leveling. And it's like the best kind of, supplement or drug or whatever, like hit of oxytocin and adrenaline and endorphins and, everything all at the same time. And just, I feel like my body literally feels new because it's just expanded. There's more space, there's more energy moving and flowing and excitement. It's amazing. So I totally agree. 100%.
I don't know if anyone, here's another great example that I'd like to share as a film. It's a documentary that proves the power of the collective. And it's called The Singing Revolution. And it takes place, I believe, in Latvia when the Russians were attempting to invade Latvia. I think it was in the 70s, maybe the 80s. The film's a little bit dated, but the premise of it is that this is true. The people in the country were so freaked out, as I'm sure everyone in the Ukraine has. We know what they're going through. It's like that complete panic and freak out about the Russians coming to their borders, that the Latvians joined hands across the entire country and began singing the same song. And it was like the Russian tanks just didn't cross the line. They just didn't come in. And it was like that power, that energy, they just saw, it was a movement. It was a huge movement. And through song, this particular song, which everybody knew, it was unbelievable. The Singing Revolution.
I'll check that out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, it wouldn't have been the Russians, it would have been the Soviets then.
Soviets, thank you.
They
absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Had a habit of sticking, a bunch of people from different nations, just like, here, do this or else,
Right. But that was so darn inspiring, that film. It was just amazing, the power of the collective. And that's, again, when I think about the ants, I go, the power of the collective. And maybe this is opening a can of worms, but I truly believe that, even though I'm not somebody who I basically consider myself spiritual, I don't subscribe to any particular belief, let's put it that way. Although I know that, I just believe in the power of creation. And I believe that my feeling is that Jesus was some amazing dude who really understood all this and was galvanizing people to understand that they held the power.
Yeah.
And when you think about so much of the symbolism and everything around that time with the cross, and like you even think about how it relates to the original First Nations wisdom, all the four directions, everything. And it's quite amazing. And I think people were joining in that collective consciousness, and we're starting to wake up, and hence everything, but it continues to this day. And the confusion that we hear in the messaging, I think, is to stop us from piecing those dots together that help us awaken to what, our collective truth is. Sorry, I keep freezing up.
Oh, you keep coming back.
But whatever our collective, our collective truth. And I love that you're having these prayer circles, and I think the more people that could tap into what's happening, at cohesive times, apparently the exponential power of that is just huge. You feel it in a room.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, the amplification, I mean, Lynn McTaggart, the work that she's done over the past 30 years or whatever as a journalist with her Power of 8 groups is, it's different from meditation. It activates a different part of the brain. It has a lot more to do with cultivating oneness and the benefits, whether you are a receiver or a giver, in a Power of 8 circle, whether you are in the same room or not. the benefit is the same, and the amplification and the mirroring effect that happens as a result of this interconnectivity that is going on as people are immersed in these, sometimes only for like half an hour, even not like, hours on end, but very focused intention work is so powerful, so incredible, and affect change for everyone involved, not just the individual that may be being focused or, intended upon. Everyone benefits from that. It's amazing.
Oh, that's wonderful. Will you put that in the chat too?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, I think it's great, because people need to know that these things exist if they don't already. Like, it's just one small step in a big potential change.
Okay.
The other book is the Intention Experiment. Is that the first one?
Yeah.
Well, put that in chat, please. Yeah.
Is anyone should be putting it in?
Sure.
Okay. And then actually what we'll do when I do the blurb, I'll include all of this information in the YouTube blurb, which will then go out onto all of the podcast blurbs too, so that we can have the links and everything in there. So I know we could keep talking here, but I'm looking at the time and being mindful of the time. And so I think maybe for today, we'll wrap up here, even though there's so much more to discuss, because we have another small segment to go through. And then we'll have Frances let people know where they can find out more about her, get in touch with her, and that kind of thing. So, Honey Bunch, are you ready with your questions?
Yep.
Okay, so Frances, this is what's called the super rapid fire question round. Glenn is going to bombard you for 1 minute with a bunch of questions. It's just a fun way to get to know you a little bit better. Okay. And all we want is off the top of your head, no critical thinking.
All right.
And then at the end of it, he's going to tell you what you've won.
Oh.
All right, so Honey Bunch, if you are ready,
I'm with you.
On your mark, get set, go.
Okay. How many tattoos do you have?
None.
Okay, and which do you prefer? The 21st century or the 20th century?
21st.
Walking on the beach or in a forest?
Oh, tough one. Forest.
Asking for help or going it alone?
Oh, I'd go it alone.
Jigsaw or crossword puzzles?
Crossword.
One life or reincarnation?
Reincarnation.
Swearing or hitting a pillow?
Swearing.
Having a decent salary job or self-employment?
Self-employment.
Typing or handwriting?
Handwriting.
Music or books?
Music.
Sweet or savory?
Sweet.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Showers or baths?
Baths.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay, Honey Bunch, tell Frances what she's won.
Okay.
That was tough, because I think there's so like forests or beaches. Are you kidding me?
I know. So
Gosh.
I get pretty devious sometimes.
But you chose. Way to go.
Yeah. Most people just go both.
Both. Yeah.
Okay, well, there. You see, that wasn't the possibilitist in me. I was just playing by what I thought were your strict rules. Isn't that something? Oh, man, I got work to do. See, nobody's perfect, right? I'm just learning.
Okay, so I'm going to read two things. One of them they're both from the same book, actually. Geary's Guide to the World's Greatest Aphorists by James Geary. It's my favorite kind of collection of aphorisms. And
that's neat.
Eric Hoffer, who I was going to read something from his book, since we're getting sort of slightly political, Between the Devil and the Dragon, but it's pretty heavy because it talk about collectivism and individualism. But so I'll just pick up one of his little short quotes. And anyway, this is, he says, nonconformists travel, as a rule, in bunches. You rarely find a nonconformist who goes it alone. and woe to him inside a nonconformist clique who does not conform with nonconformity. So
Ooh.
it's like one of those paradoxical,
Mm-hmm.
things. And the next one is just Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I love the way he phrases this. He says, "The purpose of life seems to be to acquaint a man with himself. The highest revelation is that God is in every man."
Mm.
So,
Lovely.
there you go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right. Well, Francis, now is your time to shine even more. If someone wanted to find out more about you, get in touch with you, where would they go? What would they do?
Well, I've got two ways of people reaching me.
Okay.
They can do it through creativelyunited.org, which I think I put in the chat already, or they can reach me via my website, which is francislitman.com.
All right. We will have links to those in the YouTube description, and we'll put up a slide when I edit this. Francis, thank you so much. This has been such an amazing conversation, even more fun and just like more juicy than I expected. And we didn't even touch on some of the stuff that you were going to share. We didn't even talk about the art that is behind you. There was so much to, dig into. And so perhaps we might be able to do it again someday.
Well,
And
thank you. You made it a lot of fun. Although that pop quiz at the end, I was thinking I'm at the eye doctor and they make you choose, and I hate that. And I was like, okay, I felt like I was at the eye doctor. I've got to pick one, and then just against everything I feel. That's not. Anyways, you're right. So thank you.
all right.
That was fun. A lot of fun, and it was lovely hearing your insights to all these things as well. And I love what you have to share. I think you're doing very important work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, we really enjoy it. I am grateful to be doing this with Glenn, and we're so grateful for everyone who comes on the show, because it's just, we learn something every single time. We're just expanding and being expanded and leaning into, the who do you think you are question again and again and again. And so, so we're so grateful for your time, for your presence, for your insights and wisdom today. Honey Bunch, thank you so much for co-steering the ship as always. And thank you to everyone who tuned in, who listened, whether it was live or on the replay. Thank you for however it is that you're engaging with us. We are so grateful for your time and presence. Stay tuned for another brand spanking new episode of Who Do You Think You Are, coming in another week or two. That's it for today. Bye.